It's only a few days before Halloween is upon us, and so it makes sense for this week's video to reflect that. Thomas and Friends is no stranger to spooky episodes, and ghosts in particular are a recurring theme throughout the series. We only get very brief glimpses of these ghost engines, and so I thought I'd draw them a bit closer up, and talk about them in the process. It's time to get out my tablet and start drawing. This character appears in Ghost Train, or Percy's Ghostly Trick if you prefer. This episode inspired a popular creepypasta character in the form of Timothy, not to be confused with the China Clay engine. Timothy is basically the same shape as Thomas but light grey, and in the story he turns evil and drives off an unfinished bridge. I'm not sure why the creator of the creepypasta decided to base the ghost engine off of Thomas specifically, when the engine in the episode itself is quite clearly using Percy's model. I guess they just wanted an evil, effed up version of Thomas. Just a glimpse into their dark reality. Basically the Thomas version of Sonic.exe, because let's face it, that's basically what Timothy is. But in my mind, the ghost engine looks like Percy, so my interpretation of the ghost engine will look closer to Percy than Thomas. Originally, I was going to have the engine be the exact same shape as Percy, but since Percy is canonically a hodgepodge of different engine parts that may have been rebuilt more than once, I later decided to give this engine a slightly different appearance. Most notably, his saddle tank is a slightly different, more conventional shape. I also swapped out his coal bunker for an open cab. As Percy says at the beginning of the episode, every year on the date of the accident, it runs again. He is vague about what accident this engine had. Possibly he didn't know himself, since he only heard it from his driver, who heard about it from a fictional TV show. When drawing this picture, I had the idea that the accident in question may have been a collision of some sort, since it would mirror Percy's accident in the story proper, albeit severe enough to take out the engine. I've given the ghost engine a bent buffer beam with cracked buffers, as a sneaky reference to Season 2 of Thomas and Friends. I've even snapped off his centre lamp iron. The more eagle-eyed Thomas enjoys out there may remember that midway through Season 2's production, Percy's centre lamp iron broke off and had to be held in with a conspicuous glob of glue. It seems that such a luxury never befell the ghost engine, since he was already scrapped or destroyed in the wreckage from his crash. I've given the ghost a shrieking face. Possibly his face is stuck in the same horrifying expression it was making when the accident occurred. In the story, Percy says that the ghost shrieks like a lost soul as it plunges into the gap. Although when I was very little, due to the way Ringo Starr pronounced lost soul, I thought he was saying shrieking like a fossil, which begged the question, since when did fossils shriek? Help! Help! I'm the remains of a dinosaur that's been stuck in a rock for millions of years and I can't get out! Help! Help! Maybe that could be the plot of a really bad low-budget horror movie or something, assuming it hasn't been made already. But with that tangent out of the way, here is the finished picture. This engine appeared in Duncan Gets Spooked. After Duncan teases Peter Sam for having an accident with some trucks, Rusty tells him a ghost story to try and put him in his place. The story goes that after a hard day's work, a little engine was returning home from the quarry during the night, but lost control on the old iron bridge and fell into the swamps far below, never to be found again. Workmen claimed that the engine's ghost would occasionally appear on the bridge when the moon is full, but would never reach the other side. I know a lot of people were scared of this episode as a kid. Personally, the spooky episodes of Thomas never really scared me, although I was scared of Scruffy getting pulled apart in Toad Stands By. To me, the ghost story in this episode always seemed more sad than scary. All the engine wanted to do was go home, and then he ended up drowning in the swamp through no fault of his own. I guess the world is a cruel place sometimes. I say Rusty told the story, and they did in the final episode, but in the original draft of the episode script, it was Duke who told Duncan the story. Perhaps Rusty heard the story from Duke. Some have theorised that in the TV series, following the Mid-Sodor Railway's closure, parts of the line were reopened as part of the Skarloey Railway, explaining why most of the MSR's location are also seen on the Skarloey Railway. This could mean that the line to the slate quarry via the Old Iron Bridge was once under the ownership of the Mid-Sodor Railway, explaining why Duke knows the story. A mystery engine briefly existing before disappearing would fit more with the Mid-Sodor Railway than the Skarloey Railway, I think. Other engines came and went, as they say. Skarloey's model appears as a background engine in Grandpuff, and so it's possible that this engine in particular is the ghost engine. Perhaps the ghost engine was the Mid-Sodor's original number 8, before Atlas, or possibly their number 9 engine. Given that the Mid-Sodor Railway had an engine called Jennings, who was of the same design as Rheneas, perhaps this engine could be called Fletcher, since both designs were built by Fletcher Jennings. We have a pretty good idea of how this ghost engine looked. He used the same design as Skarloey, was painted black before the accident, and his ghost is a very light, almost white colour. Aside from making his face visible, I've done one other thing, which is draw pondweed all around him. Given that he was left to rust away in a pool of stagnant water, it makes sense that he wouldn't be the cleanest ghost in the world. I've also drawn fireflies all around him, since this episode would seem to suggest that they are a common sight near the Old Iron Bridge. When I was little, I was a little confused as to how the fireflies were able to form the shape of an engine in front of Duncan. I think the idea is that Duncan's mind is playing tricks on him, but I originally thought that Duncan's driver and fireman had spoken to the fireflies and told them to make the shape of an engine when Duncan shows up. I was not a very smart kid. But, with all that said, here is the completed image. And now we come to the final engine of the video. This ghost engine appears at the start of the episode Scaredy Engines, where Edward is telling one of his spooky stories to the other engines at Tidmouth Sheds. All we know about this ghost is that he allegedly haunts the smelters yards every Halloween night, looking for his lost whistle. His shape is the same as Donald and Douglas. Now, maybe I'm just splitting hairs, but there seems to be something else that this engine is missing alongside his whistle. Something quite significant and hard to miss. He's got no tender. Given that Donald and Douglas are tender engines, I don't think the ghost engine is going to get very far without one. It seems interesting that Edward decided to focus on the engine's missing whistle and not his tender. Perhaps he just thought the idea of an engine with a missing tender would be too upsetting for the engines in the audience, and we're hearing a censored or pre-Watershed version of the story. I suppose a tender engine losing their tender would be a pretty upsetting thing. Suddenly you've got no immediate access to food or water, so you have to go on knowing that you will soon starve and dehydrate and slowly wither away. It's not a nice thought. Maybe the engine was evading the cutter's torch and went to the smelter's yards in the hope that they could hide from the scrap merchant or any snitching diesels. Unfortunately for the soon-to-be ghost engine, their tender ended up being uncoupled and melted down, either by accident or accidentally on purpose by a backstabbing shunter or yard worker. They then removed the engine's whistle so he couldn't cry out for help. The engine attempted to retrieve his whistle, but ended up diving smokebox first into an incinerator or something like that. On that date, every year thereafter, the engine returns as a ghost, attempting to find the whistle but never succeeding. In contrast to the two lightly coloured ghost engines from before, I've decided to make this one darker, since I think it works better with the fiery, smoky red of the smelter shed. I think working with a limited colour palette for this drawing has turned out really well. I've basically only used blacks, reds and various shades thereof. Sometimes less really is more. Maybe not the most sensitive thing to say to the engine who has just lost his tender and whistle, mind you. With that said and done, here is the completed image. And there you have it, the ghost engines from the classic series of Thomas & Friends, up close and personal. I've enjoyed this excuse to draw something a bit different and experiment with different colour palettes, and I hope you've enjoyed this more detailed look at these lesser spotted apparitions. Next week I'll probably be drawing something a bit less spooky, but if I don't see you before then, make sure to have a happy Halloween, and I'll see you next time.